Hello, everyone. Just popping in here at the start of the episode to give you an announcement because we have a merch store now. So, if you've ever wanted some of Serial's drawings adorning your walls, your mugs, or your body, well, now you can do that. So, all you need to do is go to Sythycarp, sythycarp-store.printify.me, and there you'll be able to find all our products and see what you like. It'll be a nice way to support the podcast, and hey, other people will know you are very cool and enjoy podcast-based things. So nice. The link will be in the description of the episode, so you can just find it there. No need to type everything in. But yeah, we hope you enjoyed the episode in the meantime.
Hello, and welcome to So You Think You Can Rule Persia, the podcast where we've rated and reviewed all the kings of Persia from Diocles to Yazdegerd III. Today, The Rounds, Episode 3. I'm Serial, and my pronouns are they, them.
And I'm Umberto, and my pronouns are he, him. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the third of our rounds, where we will be choosing which two among Khosrow I Anushiravan, Bahram VI Chobin, Ardashir I the Great, Xerxes I, and Mithridates I will go through. These are all big names, big important names, but only two of them can pass through, and we'll find out who it is today. But Serial, first of all, we have to go through what the people thought of our choice last time.
Ooh, fun.
If you remember, we decided to go for Kavad I and Mithridates II, Mithridates the Great, as our candidates, leaving behind a great favorite of Shapur II. And then Vologases IV and Orodes II that we sort of kicked out earlier on in the round. Now, Serial, do you think that our audience agreed with us, or do you think that they had strong disagreements?
According to what I have seen online, which is not much, because I haven't been online that much, I think our audience have been mostly in agreement, but you might have to correct me on that. I think they were less mad about Alexander than I thought they would be.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No. But this last round, for our previous one, when we had a look, mostly everybody agreed that Seleucus was better than Alexander, or at least, more worth moving forward than Alexander. But for this last one, I'll tell you what the scores were. So, 43% of our audience thought Shapur II should have gone through.
That is fair.
35% thought Mithridates the Great was meant to go through. Then they were tied at 11% for Kavad I and Vologases IV, which I was surprised about the Vologases position.
Yeah.
And nobody voted for Orodes II.
Yeah, I feel like we,
I honestly, I would have expected, more love for Kavad. I'm amazed so few people voted for Kavad. I liked
the
him.
other
It was my
candidates.
choice. I mean, yeah, but Kavad's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then, instead of Vologases IV, I expected more people to vote for Orodes, because Carrhae and, fighting the Romans. Vologases is interesting, but kind of an obscure figure. But there we go. This is who we had last time, and, well, sorry, audience, if you disagree. Shapur is staying behind, but he had a good long reign. He also got to be a Shahanshah in general, so that's always a good position to have. Worthy of respect. But now, Serial, it is time to pop into the scheminess round. Because we've gone through all the different categories, now we need to see who are our top 5 schemers, and, well, what did they do? What is memorable about them? And we do have several Shahanshahs in here, but interestingly enough, we'll find out later, some of the lowest schemers are in this round to be chosen from. So we'll find out who they are and why they didn't scheme much. What was their deal? So to start with, first place is, of course, Darius the Great, Darius the First, the most schemy man to have ever lived, with a full 20 out of 20. Because, come on, he's the guy.
Yeah.
He does the schemes.
He invented it.
Well, yeah, why did he get all the scheming points? Well, he got it for multiple reasons. So, first of all, the main one is that he murdered the previous king, Bardia, and made everybody believe that he was an imposter all along, and actually Darius was only restoring the dynasty to its former glory.
Mm-hmm.
That's very big. Then Darius also said that he was an Achaemenid, that he was a distant cousin of the royal family, and that actually he was royalty all along. While in reality, nobody ever mentions being an Achaemenid before him, and only after him does it become a thing. So many people have thought it likely that Darius was not a member of the royal family. He just made up this distant ancestor, and that made the dynasty for him. So very schemy there. We then have different plots that he goes through with. So we have the example of when they were deciding who of the conspirators should be king. Darius made a whole trick with his horse to try and make it whinny at first light, and that is how they made him king, through a whole bunch of conspiratorial stuff. And then also we have different elements, like you may remember the Zopyrus affair, where Darius sent some guy horribly mutilated into the city of Babylon to try and win their trust, and then eventually just open the gates of the city so that Darius could march in and take it.
Mm-hmm.
So that was pretty intense. And we thought that he was definitely worth a lot of scheminess points.
Didn't he mutilate the guy himself?
Yeah, the guy mutilated himself,
and
then Darius sent him off. So, yeah, tough.
He was like, oh, perfect.
Yeah, done, solved. So yeah, Darius, very schemy, lots of manipulation going on. His whole project of legitimacy is massive, and, well, he was very successful for it, and that's why he's our first place.
Mm-hmm.
Second place instead, we have Musa, our girl.
Yeah.
The only woman to gain a Shahanshah in our rounds.
And one of the few women
she got an 18.
Persia.
Yes. one of 3/4, depending on how you're counting. And yeah, she got an 18 out of 20. Very impressive. She just got a 9 from the both of us. What did she do? Well, she was born as a slave in Rome, and then eventually she was shipped over to be a concubine of Phraates IV.
Mm-hmm.
And there, once in the court, she managed to sort of work her way up. She became first a wife, then the chief wife of the king. Then she found a way to slowly and methodically exile all the potential heirs to the throne. And then, when the time was right, she murdered her husband and made herself queen. That was pretty cool. There was a lot of scheming going on. I mean, her main skill was scheming and managing to get to this position. Like, we saw that as a queen proper, she didn't do a great job for the kingdom. But just climbing up to that position was a really impressive feat that we appreciated. Next up in third place, we have Alexander the Great with a 17, just below Musa. Alexander has a lot of schemes to his name. He probably murdered his father, Philip, or at the very least, his mother knew something about it, and Alexander thought, yeah, this is fine. This is probably okay. Don't question it. It'll be all right.
Mm-hmm.
Did a bunch of that. That was pretty intense. Then he had a whole bit of propaganda victories, basically naming himself the son of a god. That was very impressive for his scheminess. Did a lot of that over there. He then had several different conspiracies in court eliminated, and several members of the old Macedonian nobility gotten rid of, such as Parmenion, for example, and his family. They were all disposed of, and Alexander managed to just walk freely and happily along. And then he just had a bunch of subterfuge that he was working on during his campaigns, and just broadly kind of a schemy guy. He was interesting in that point of view. And then next up, we have a few choices to make because we have 3 people tied for 4th place. And we need to decide who's 4th, who's 5th, and who's out of the top 5. So among these, we have Vologases IV, our candidate from last time, got several votes in the public rounds. He was a distant prince from the son of a usurper, and through some bizarre reason we don't know about, he managed to take over the kingdom from the legitimate king, either kill the king or just establish a coup as quickly as possible when the succession was taking place, and he made himself king of kings, and his dynasty got to rule for centuries, if not in Iran, at least in Armenia. So that was pretty cool, Vologases. Next up, we have Kavad I, also another member of last round, where what he did, well, he established the Mazdakite cult in the empire, made sure that it was all going to be cool. I mean, the reason I wanted to put him forward, because, yeah, he establishes a weird new religion with the objective of breaking the nobles apart, because he can. He then also escapes from the Fortress of Oblivion. That's cool. He gathers a bunch of Hephthalites to join with him and march back on Ctesiphon and retake the empire. So that was very important. And then he did a bunch of other things, such as maybe trying to get his son adopted by the Romans to establish the succession. He also made sure to rewrite a lot of history for his own gains. So, for example, there are things that he attributed to Ardashir the Great, Ardashir I, the founder of the empire, and according to that, everything was actually meant to be how Kavad wanted it. So he managed to use a lot of his political manipulation and scheming to get a better outcome. And last of this group of 3 is Antiochus III, Antiochus the Great. We'll remember him. He was very good for scheming, especially in his younger reign, because he was in charge of a crumbling empire, and he managed to just take it out and save himself. He was, at the start, subjected to 3 different potential puppet masters, and through one way or another, he managed to outmaneuver them all and have them all killed. So, and also, when he did all that, it was under the pretext that it was actually his council telling him to do it, and actually he was innocent and it was fine.
Yeah.
So
none of
that
it was his
fun.
idea. He just, how would he
No,
have
of course
known?
not.
He's just a guy.
Exactly. He was just being a very nice, relaxing guy. So that was the main thing that impressed us very much about his scheminess. So among these last 3, Vologases IV, Kavad I, and Antiochus the Great, who do you think deserves 4th place in scheminess? Who 5th and who 6th?
Well, I distinctly remember the council made me do it sort of as a good...
That's a good one, yeah.
Good moment. Who has the most, instances of scheminess?
Oof, well, Vologases has the big one bit of scheminess. Antiochus does have to deal with multiple potential puppet masters. I'd feel like Kavad is a middle ground.
Yeah.
Because he does have a lot of scheminess, but it's more spread out. It's less of a concentrated barrage.
Yeah, because it depends how we want to... what we want to consider more interesting. The not many moments of scheminess, but the ones that there are very intense and important.
Mm-hmm.
Or someone who's constantly in some sort of plot and manipulation.
Yeah, right.
I'm not quite sure. Do you have a preference?
I would say, again, for sources reason, I would put Vologases at last place. So 6th place, because he is, it's interesting, but it's just that we have literally no idea how he pulled it off or what he did. We just know through some weird conspiratorial magic, he became king when he had no right to.
Through some strange reason that we will not.
That's why I'd put him below. Yeah. So that's why I'd put him below. But as for Kavad and Antiochus the Great, I feel like Antiochus might be more traditionally schemy. So it's like he is going in and murdering people and slandering people and getting rid of them, while Kavad is more political, I would call it. So I'd say less pure scheminess.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Do you know what? Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, it's a good rubric as any. Like, of course, we gave them high points to all of them for a reason, right? So.
Yeah, exactly. They're all tied, but it's just if we had to really give them fractions of votes extra, who deserves it? And I think Antiochus the Great does.
Who's cooler?
Cut to
But
the
yes,
chase.
I remember Antiochus.
Yeah, it's fun. So yeah, so our top 6 scheminess are Darius the Great, Musa, Alexander the Great, Antiochus the Great, Kavad the First, and Vologases.
Yeah.
Of these, I think all of these are Shahs, so we thought that the scheminess is definitely a good feature when you're becoming a king of kings. It will make you interesting.
I think partly because we didn't have that many people that had high points in that, and it makes for a really
That's fair.
cool
That makes sense.
story point.
Mm.
Because they are bending the rules to, benefit themselves.
Yeah, it's more theatrical as a thing. It's less by the books. You want to go further on. And instead, in the bottom 5 of our scheminess, we have 2 Shahanshahs out of 5.
Mm-hmm.
So
because we also value honesty, surprisingly.
Yeah. So as always, I will just give them their grade in scheminess. These are all tied for 0, and I'm ranking them in order of who got the highest score at the end, despite having 0 scheminess. So at the top is one of our protagonists of today, Xerxes I. Xerxes was, he's sort of in the shadow of Darius for this, because his father did everything schemy. His father killed everybody that needed to be killed.
Yeah.
And Xerxes was now in a nice, stable period, so he didn't really need to be schemy. He did a good job, he governed properly, and that's how he turned out. Instead, in second place, we have Mithridates I. So Xerxes I had a 47.1. Mithridates I had a 44.6. And again, Mithridates, he's more of a conqueror. He's the founder of the Parthian Empire, and his main role is essentially conquering all of Iran, conquering Mesopotamia, delivering a crushing blow to the Seleucids, and
he shows his
being
power
a
in
competent
different ways.
administrator.
Yeah, no need to be schemy about it.
Yeah, he was also in an early enough period in Parthian history that the nobility was still very small, very regional, very minding their own business.
Great.
And he could actually just deal with that. The nobility wasn't scheming and manipulating stuff. They were just accepting, oh my goodness, we now have our land. We now have 10 times as much land as we used to. Brilliant. This is amazing.
Things could be so beautiful if the nobles just stopped.
Yes. But hey, they stopped at the end of the podcast by being entirely annihilated. Or founding their own kingdoms and having to deal with their own nobles at some point. Who knows? We'll find out eventually, one day. And then in third place, we have Hormizd IV with 41.1. He was the one that essentially was the heir to Khosrow I, and he was the one that got out-manipulated by Bahram Chobin, one of our protagonists of today. He is the one that thought either it's great to insult my strongest general, or was eventually out-manipulated for this and got cooed at the end of his life. So his is it really a lack of scheminess. He did not see it coming. He did a reasonably good job at governing and war and everything, but otherwise scheminess really terrible, and that was his demise ultimately. Then we have in fourth place Antiochus I, Antiochus Soter with a 40.75. Antiochus is the heir to Seleucus I. Again, very much like Xerxes, he was given a brand new empire that kind of worked and didn't really have many internal enemies, and he just ran with it and competently ran the empire.
Yeah.
Did a good job. Honestly, he ran it a little bit too competently. We thought that he wasn't interesting enough to warrant a Shahanshah, that, brilliant to live under, but otherwise, he's all right, I guess. He did he did end up sleeping or marrying his stepmom, but that's that's less schemy. That's more in the shock factor, which is where he got some extra points. Yeah, exactly.
It's stepmother, not mother. So,
Yeah, exactly. So it's totally normal and cool. And last, the fifth worst scheminess is Vologases I. Again, he was coming out of Parthia after a long period of messy successions, but he managed to get elected relatively unanimously. There were no civil wars afterwards. And he managed to fight a while with the Romans, gain Armenia, gain control of Armenia from Nero, make the empire a lot more stable and orderly, and he was essentially establishing a bit of a Parthian golden age before things go wrong towards the end. So he did a very good job overall as ruler, but again, no need for scheminess. He was living in a good enough time that it was all right. Or maybe he dealt with all his rivals before becoming king, and we just don't know about it. But, well, that's where you get a low scheminess score. And now, Serial, would you like to guess, who do you think is the most schemy dynasty? Who do you think is the least schemy dynasty?
Well, I think there will be higher levels of scheminess when the nobles are like in full power. Because that's where you get a lot of backstabbing. Even though Darius,
Darius definitely skewing things.
Yeah, exactly. Should not be counted because he's outside of the norm. I think it should be... Where did we have the most nobles? In this this last dynasty?
I mean, under the Arsacids, the nobles were at their maximum power because, they could vote for the king very freely, and there was a civil war every other weekend. But, yeah. So you think it's them that have the highest scheminess score?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, well, we'll find out. So, let me list them all again. Standard averages. The first dynasty is the Medians with a 6.5 out of 20.
Yes.
That's probably due to Diocles being a scheminess build and Astyages with the whole trying to kill his grandson and manipulating a bunch of people for that. Yeah. Just want you to build your character properly. Then second place are the Achaemenids with a 5.85 out of 20. Again, Darius, strong effects. Remember, this is the dynasty of Parasatis. So also, while we didn't rate her directly, there was a lot going on that we'd have to remember.
She had her hands in
good stuff there.
Yeah,
exactly. And third place are the Argeads. Again, mostly carried by Alexander with, his brother and son not really being super schemy, but Alexander got one of the top scores, so well, he brings the average up quite a bit.
He tends to do that a lot, huh?
Yeah.
In every different subcategory.
Yes, very much so. Then next up we have the Sassanids with a 3.74 out of 20. Again, there's a lot of plotting going on, but they're often the victims of it, so that probably evaluates to a low enough score. Like, we did have some pretty cool ones up there, but not as high as we could have. Then next up are the Seleucids with 3.67 out of 20. With, the Seleucids, they had some fun stuff, but again, a lot of child rulers, a lot of rulers that didn't live very long, so that'll bring it down. And actually, Cyril, the Arsacids that you were fond of are the lowest dynasty with a 2.69 out of 20, probably due to lack of sources and being mainly victims of somebody's scheminess. I feel like true. Musa is one of the largest ones here. Everybody else, they try, but it's either unknown to us or it is kind of the target of conspiracies.
That makes sense. It was so silly of me, actually.
And then, well, let's just go quickly through the Bayesian adjusted mean to see what happens when we factor in the number of kings that are part of it. So we start up with the Achaemenids actually take first place because there's a bunch of them, a lot of them schemy, 4.8 out of 20. Very good. The Medias instead are now relegated to second place with 4.45 out of 20. The Argeads get are third with a 4.20 out of 20. And then we have almost even the Seleucids and the Sassanids, with the Seleucids being at 3.80 and the Sassanids at 3.79, so very close if we count the numbers of rulers. And again, the Arsacids are still last with a 3.15 out of 20. So there we go. That's what we had for scheminess. Join us next time for Shock Factor. So we'll see who the most shocking dynasty was. The answer might surprise you.
Shocking.
But okay, now, Serial, it is time to look at our 5 candidates for the day and recap what they were like. So I'll remind you who they are, Serial, and you can tell me if there's somebody that you have a strong memory of or if they're all not ringing much of a bell. So first of all, Khosrow I, Khosrow Ardashir I, with a 74.8 total score, our third highest scorer. Then Bahram VI, Bahram Chobin, with a 54.6 out of 100. Then Ardashir I, Ardashir the Great, with a 65. Xerxes I with a 47.1. And finally, Mithridates I with a 44.6. Does anybody stand out to you or anybody feel especially blank to you? We'll go through a recap, of course, but just here before we start,
well,
is there anybody
I
you're
remember
especially fond of?
then that Khosrow I was incredible
Mm-hmm.
and
Yes.
stuck it to the Romans a bunch, and it makes me happy. And he moved an entire city stone by stone to the point where one of the people was complaining that he misses a tree that was in his house before, and he brought the tree and planted it in front of his house again.
Yes, very good. I'm surprised you remember, but it is a good anecdote.
Listen, some things stay there. Not important things, but some things stay there.
Hey, cool anecdotes have that job.
And I remember from Ardashir the Great, I'm looking at his portrait and I don't remember much. I can't wait for the recap so I can actually know which one of the stories he is. But it's just according to my own portrait, the vibe I'm getting is a military king.
Yeah, I mean, he's the founder of the Sassanid Empire, so
lots of war.
He is cool for reasons, and we'll see if he deserves to move along.
Exactly. I do remember Mithridates the First because, again, another founder of a dynasty, essentially.
Yeah, true.
And very impressive. That's right. And I do remember Xerxes the First because it was relatively at the beginning of the podcast, and I remember him having visions of going to Athens, and that was an interesting and cool episode. What am I missing?
Good time. And then Bahram Chobin. Any strong memories about him?
Not really, other than archery.
Okay, well, we'll find out then.
We had Khosrow II right after, so I feel like that took more space in my...
Yeah, fair. Understandable. Okay, so let's start with Khosrow I Anushiravan, the immortal soul. Well, Khosrow was the son of Kavad, that you remember, our protagonist from last time who got through. And as a young prince, you remember that he was supposed to be adopted by the Romans, according to his father. But then the Romans said, oh, no, we can adopt you as a barbarian, I guess. Like, not as a real person. I mean, be real.
Oof.
So that made him unhappy.
Yeah, I wonder why.
Yeah, he was also in charge of decimating the Mazdakites. Remember the cult that Kavad had fostered. Khosrow is the one who personally goes and kills the prophet and kills all his main followers. A lot of blood there. Scary guy. He then also signs the eternal peace with Rome that would last less than a decade. So, fun times.
Yeah, there. Incredibly eternal, actually, yeah.
Yeah. You remember that this was also at the start of his reign, was when he was still at war with the Romans, and the Romans refused to recognize him because there was a pretender, so Khosrow went and killed his brother brutally, and then, panting and covered in blood, went to the Romans and said, we're making peace now.
Yeah.
So that was neat.
Intense.
He then essentially did the rare thing of being an amazing king following an amazing king, and he consolidated his father's reforms, restructuring the army,
Incredibly
the
rare.
economy of the
Yeah.
empire, making sure that it was all restructured as something new. I mean, his empire is going to become the model for good government in the future, like future caliphates will look towards Khosrow and say, yeah, that's how we were meant to rule an empire. We should follow his example. That's really cool.
Impressive.
He also builds great things in Ctesiphon. He builds the Takakizra, which is this massive audience chamber for him to receive court of the people, with a massive crown dangling from the ceiling, hovering over his head, which is pretty cool.
Terrifying.
He also builds a series of massive wall structures to protect against the nomads. And he builds a bunch of fancy palaces that are nice to have in the capital. He was also fond of innovations overall and tried to attract scholars and knowledgeable people from across the empire and beyond. He hosted the refugees of the Platonic Academy that had been closed in the Roman Empire because it was pagan. He says, I don't care what your religion is, just work for me and be clever.
Do the
Great
science.
Policy. Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. He then also started a new war with Rome while Justinian was trying to reconquer Italy. And during this war is what happens in your portrait serial, because he goes, captures Antioch, and transports it bodily to the outskirts of Ctesiphon and builds Khosrow's better Antioch. Because
he can.
It's his better Antioch. It's nice. He might as well. He then destroys the Hephthalites in the east. Remember the Hephthalites that had been invited by Peros a few decades before.
Yeah.
Had been constant threat to the empire. They had killed a king of kings, imprisoned another. It was a whole terrible thing. But now Khosrow destroys them. They're gone. The empire is stable and under control. He does invite the Turks to help out, which our next candidate, Bahram, will have to deal with. But
we keep making the same mistakes.
Brilliant. Love it. Yeah. He then manages to conquer Yemen. And then he has one last war with the Romans, which has sort of a mixed success, but broadly seems to be victorious. They were in the process of negotiating the peace when he died. And the Sassanid kings are called Khosrows after him. So, like people call Caesars. Afterwards, like in Islamic scholarship, they talk about the Khosrows of the Sassanid Empire, because he is so influential. To be fair, there's probably the influence of Khosrow II as well, because he's cool, but still, he is one of the reasons this happens. And so, just to cap it all off, we have a quote from the Roman historian Agathias, who claims that it could be hardly claimed that even Cyrus, the son of Cambyses, or Darius, the son of Hystaspes, or for that matter, the famous Xerxes, who opened up the seas to cavalry and the mountains to shipping, would stand comparison with him.
Damn.
And he's facing Xerxes this round, so we'll get to decide if Agathias is right.
Mm-hmm.
So thoughts on Khosrow? Broadly happy with the description?
Yeah, very impressive, especially as you said, being one of those rare instances where a great king is succeeded by another great king.
Mm-hmm.
Not very common, and very impressive.
No. And to give you a recap of his score, he got a 2 out of 10 for final moments, an 18 out of 20 for battle hardness, a 11 out of 20 for scheminess, a 15 out of 20 for shock factor, a 20 out of 20 for air and shine, 4 out of 5 for face of faces, and a 4.8 out of 5 for lengthiness. So very high score, reason he's our third highest scorer.
Very impressive.
But wait, Serial, there's another contestant. Slightly a couple kings down the road. We have Bahram VI, Bahram Chobin, which you didn't remember much of, but, well, let's try and refresh your memory on him.
Yes, this does not speak for the king, this speaks for my own memory.
So Bahram, you remember, was a great general under Hormizd IV. He was part of this first new generation of generals that had the power to run armies that weren't their local armies. There was several royal armies on different areas of the border. He was in charge of the north. And, well, when he was in charge of the north, there was a great invasion of the Turks that risked breaking the empire and seriously brought everybody in trouble. But Bahram then just took his trusty men, went with his army, and managed to absolutely win a devastating victory against the Turks and managed to conquer a bunch of land from them. Not only that, but we get reports that he personally shot the Turkic Kagan with an arrow shot from about a kilometer away.
Yes, that was
pretty impressive.
Incredible, yes, true.
It was a great headshot.
He was famously a good archer, so plausible.
Yes.
I remember we did the math to see if you can shoot an arrow that far.
Yeah, exactly. So it's possible. It could happen. And yeah, he had manuals of archery and he had epic poems written about him because he was so cool and so impressive.
Yeah.
His loyalty, though, was eventually questioned by the king Hormizd, which resulted in an insult where the king supposedly sent him a woman's dress and woman's apparel saying, look at you, you're unworthy, you should be ashamed of yourself, you're dismissed. But it's possible that Bahram himself orchestrated this just because he wanted to start a coup and needed an excuse for it. So, who knows? There we go. And he is the first general to march on Ctesiphon. This is the first time this has happened. You know, it'll eventually happen a lot in the final death throes of the empire at the end of it, but this is the first time this taboo is broken. He does it at last. Then once he becomes King of Kings, he claims to be the Messiah, the prophesied Messiah at the end of the millennium, and he will reign for 1,000 years, and everything will be amazing. I promise you guys, this will be great. But then, well, Khosrow II, our fifth highest scorer, then returned with Roman army and defeated Bahram Chobin, who was forced to flee away. And where did he flee of all places? He fled to the Turkic lands, to these people that he attacked a lot and killed their king. He is there at the court of the son of the king he'd killed. So he enters the court, he has a lot of service, he wins a duel with a prominent Turkic noble, he does a bunch of cool stuff there. And then eventually at the end, he is murdered by agents of Khosrow II because he was too dangerous to be kept alive. And his scores are a 6 out of 10 for final moments, 18 out of 20 for battle hardness, 9 out of 20 for scheminess, 13 out of 20 for shock factor, 8 out of 20 for air and shine, 0.5 out of 5 for faces, and 0.1 out of 5 for lengthiness. So overall, he is below Khosrow I. He matches him in battle hardness, which is pretty impressive, and has a cooler death. Khosrow does end up, having achieved everything and chilling out. Bahram is murdered by his lifelong enemy. So there we go. That's Bahram Chobin.
It's really
Hopefully
impressive,
that has
but a
refreshed some of
bit.
your memory.
Yes, really impressive parts of it, but also a bit sad that it ends the way it does.
I feel like there is a lot of untapped potential in Bahram Chobin, where if he had ruled for longer, a bunch of wild stuff would have happened. But for the time being, it was cool, but could have been cooler.
Yeah.
But hey, maybe that's enough for him to get past this round and into the next section. Who knows?
Who knows?
We'll have to see. Because we have as competition the one that you didn't remember very well, Ardashir the Great, Ardashir the First.
Mm-hmm.
He was the founder of the Sassanid Empire.
Tell me about
So
that.
as a young prince, he managed to conquer Persia with his father and brother. And then eventually, maybe through murdering his brother, we don't know, he eventually became king of Persia. Allegedly, yes. It's not proven in court. He managed to become king of Persia, and then he started a great war against the Arsacid, king of kings, and managed to conquer all the empire, kick out the dynasty, and establish a new one that would last for 400 years, which is very impressive. He did a good job in solidifying that legitimacy. He did a better job than Bahram Chobin at establishing his legitimacy. I like that they're here, that there are good parallels between them. He was then showing a new model of rulership with more religion and government. If you remember, the Sassanids are more fond of Zoroastrianism, so this is how Ardashir establishes this, how he introduces it to the empire. He has a broadly successful war with the Romans, nothing incredible, but since the Romans had been walking all over the Parthians for the last century or so, it's a refreshing change that Ardashir now can actually break them down and win several victories, which is a cool thing to have.
Mm-hmm.
He then also reformed the empire to be more properly Sassanid and less Parthian,
Mm.
because he centralizes it more. He absorbs many of the vassal kingdoms that were a key feature of the Parthian Empire. He just makes them part of everything, and the only one that sort of remains weird is Armenia, which he then just will be handed over to the different heirs to the throne.
Yeah. And God, will it bring us trouble?
Yeah, very much so. And he also echoes the Achaemenids with a return to the old days of a truly Persian empire, because it had been almost, 500 years since the last empire, which had its heart in Persia.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he brings it back. He makes a bunch of sculptures around key sites of the Achaemenid Empire and says, hey, look, we're back. This is the new empire that we have. And so Ardashir's scores are 2 out of 10 for final moments, 18 out of 20 for battle hardness, 8 out of 20 for scheminess, 9 out of 20 for shock factor, 20 out of 20 for air and shine, 5 out of 5 for face of faces, and a 3 out of 5 for lengthiness. So, again, tied for top in air and shine, very impressive. He has the best portrait of the top of this first 3 that we've seen, and also matches both our previous candidates for battle hardness. This is apparently a very high battle hardness round, but yeah, there we are.
Fair enough.
So how do you feel about him compared to our previous 2? How do you feel about, say, him compared to Bahram Chobin or Khosrow I?
Well,
Does he feel broadly comparable, or do you think that there's a clear outlier?
I had an idea, but my brain left. I think being the founder of a dynasty, he is, right?
Yeah, he is.
Yeah. I think that's very impressive. Certainly. See, this is the thing, because I think he's more successful as a person than Bahram. Was it Bahram?
Yeah,
the archer?
of course. Yeah, Bahram tries to establish a dynasty, but clearly fails.
Yeah, because that's what I was talking about. He's very disappointing in a way, because he starts out so well, and also has the mythological aspect of there's poems written about him. Like, he must have been so impressive as a person for then to inspire an entire character, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
But I think his achievements pale in comparison to what Ardashir is doing, because it actually has so much impact,
Yeah, I think it's fun to see them as counterexamples, because you can see that Bahram is trying to establish himself as, oh no, I'm the Messiah, I'm here starting a new dynasty that'll last for 1,000 years. And Ardashir does the same thing, except Bahram is unlucky enough that the Romans show up with Khosrow II in tow and manage to wipe the floor with him and reconquer the empire. While Ardashir had the advantage that, well, the Parthians weren't strong enough to come back and reestablish their throne. They tried, clearly, but eventually Ardashir just managed to be victorious. So we'll see at the end if we want to, which of these we want to.
Yeah, there's certainly a good
pass forward, or if both of them, who knows?
Yeah, there's certainly good to have them together. I find that quite interesting.
Okay, well, next up is Xerxes I. Xerxes, the famous one, the one that people know from the movie 300 and stuff.
Except the real version.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we have also done an episode on that Xerxes. Very different vibe.
That Xerxes also scored quite highly, so good for him. Yeah, check it out. So yeah, Xerxes I was the heir to Darius the Great and succeeded rather smoothly. His father had given him a lot of work just to make sure that he could succeed properly and there was nothing weird. And he managed to succeed smoothly enough, but there was a bit of a rebellion in Babylon that he had to suppress, and he did a good job at that. Overall, it seems like he was slightly more religious than his father, where we have an inscription from the east where he says that he has vanquished the demon worshippers and he has at last restored the true religion to the place. So that's a characteristic that he has. But the big thing he's most known for, at least in the West, is that he inherits this revenge against Athens.
Yes.
Where his father had tried to attack Athens, but he was defeated at Marathon. So Xerxes inherits this revenge plot. We can't let Athens survive. Take it down.
I keep forgetting that the Battle of Marathon was a battle with the Persian Empire.
Yes, that's right. It was trying to attack Athens under Darius, but ultimately the Greeks were successful. The Athenians, I should add.
Yeah.
Sparta was asked to join, but said, no, we're busy with a thing.
As they usually do. Today is not a good day for it.
But anyway, Xerxes gathered a massive army, and he did a bunch of very impressive engineering works to get this army to Europe. He had a colossal fleet flanking it and essentially providing supplies. He bridged the Hellespont to cross from Asia into Europe. He cut through a mountain so that his ships could pass through it and not go through a long way.
Incredible.
That was very cool. There's still signs of that to this day, which is incredible.
One of the first tunnels.
Yeah. And he then goes and burns Athens to the ground. He manages to obtain the revenge that he wanted. Brilliant. Athens is destroyed. Ultimately, unfortunately, the invasion is defeated and he returns home. Although, to be fair, he could probably spin it as a PR victory, saying, our job was to get revenge on Athens. Athens has been burned to a crisp.
So
mission accomplished. Let's go. Yeah. So done. No need to question it. But then eventually, after the war, he did a good job. He developed the empire and ensured its urbanization and trade. He essentially built several new settlements, built roads, established them, made sure they worked, made sure there was trade across all of the empire. The empire's flourishing under him. This is sort of the apex of it. And then he's also the main architect, politically at least, of the great royal city of Persepolis. This great capital that was sort of started at first by Darius is Xerxes that makes the most glorious buildings of all and makes sure that this will be a wonder of the world, that all the dignitaries that come from around the empire and beyond will see this and be in awe of how powerful and how majestic the King of Kings is.
He wasn't wrong. It is quite majestic.
Yeah. And he's then murdered by an advisor of his, who then eventually sort of coerces his son Artaxerxes into killing the supposed heir to the throne. It's a whole thing. It's very complicated, but
so it was Megabyzus?
Can't remember if it was Megabyzus at the moment. I think it may have been Megabyzus or was someone else. I think Megabyzus sort of took advantage of the coup, and it was another person that started originally. Don't have that in my notes right now. Apologies. Listen to the episode to find out.
Oh, good. It's just I remember Megabyzus, so I was like, oh, I didn't remember that it was him.
And then Xerxes, what was his score? Well, he got a 3.5 out of 10 for final moments, a 12 out of 20 for battle hardness, 0 out of 20 for scheminess, a 10 out of 20 for shock factor, and then a 15 out of 20 for air and shine, 4.5 out of 5 for face of faces, and 2.1 out of 5 for lengthiness. So out of all the scores that we had, he is the first one that doesn't really stand out. He isn't matching other people or other candidates at least, for any of his scores. But, maybe he's more well-rounded character. Who knows? So, any quick thoughts about Xerxes compared to the other candidates? Does he stand clearly above, clearly below them? Or
I mean, regardless of his
this will
score,
be more complicated.
He is incredibly accomplished. I admire Xerxes' reign.
So he is very cool, yeah. And it's also...
I stand with our decision to give him Shahanshah. I think that's a no-brainer.
Oh, yeah.
So obviously, there is something special about him.
And then last but not least, Sarah, we have another founder of an empire. We've had,
this round,
2 founders of an empire, plus an extra one that tried, so a lot of founding here. But the last one is Mithridates I, the founder of the Parthian Empire as a proper empire. Like, there was a state beforehand, but it was like a tiny thing that was at the edge of the Seleucid Empire. Not very important. Mithridates is eventually chosen as king above a bunch of other candidates who were more likely to be successors to his predecessor. But Mithridates was just so capable, so skilled that they decided, no, you deserve this. You should become King of Kings. Congratulations. So that was pretty cool. He becomes the ruler of this little kingdom. And then he starts up a war against the Bactrians, expands his empire a little bit, gets it to be stronger, more stable. Then eventually he realizes that the Seleucid Empire is falling. It's collapsing entirely.
No.
And there's a big power vacuum in Iran.
Yeah.
So in Iran, what he does is take control of everything. And he just marches through. He just absorbs all these different vassal kings, which become part of his empire. And then when there is Demetrius II trying to retake the empire, sending an expedition into Mesopotamia, well, Mithridates entirely destroys him and manages to capture him alive. And this will be several problems because Demetrius causes problems for a bunch of people, but separate story.
I do not miss him.
No, he is a weird little gremlin guy, but
he can go away.
I suppose. Yes. And then, with this new empire, Mithridates manages to, A, make sure that it'll last long enough that Mithridates II, Mithridates the Great, will be able to fully consolidate it.
Yeah, I was already so impressed by Mithridates I. And then we got Mithridates II, and he truly lived up to his name.
Yeah, very much. And yeah, Mithridates I essentially gives the baseline there, because when the Seleucid Empire collapsed, it was anyone's game who was going to take over Iran. And it was Mithridates, with his skills and his abilities, that managed to actually make it so that, no, there's going to be a Parthian Empire in this empty bit of the map. That's me. That's what I'm doing. And also, when he conquered this area, he decided to rule well and justly. You remember that he was the one that had the two coins, one where he looks very Parthian and one where he looks very Greek, because he wanted to make sure that he was a friend of the Greeks and that they liked him and he could use their cooperation in governing this new empire. Actually, this is so well made that when the Seleucids will try to retake the empire after a while, there will be rebellions against them because people are actually doing better under the Parthians now.
Yeah. So we don't want you back.
A lot
Go away.
due to Mithridates' policies. And yeah, so score-wise, Mithridates gets a 3 out of 10 for final moments, a 16 out of 20 for battle hardness, 0 out of 20 for scheminess, a 2 out of 20 for shock factor, 18 out of 20 for air and shine, 5 out of 5 for face of faces, and a 0.6 out of 5 for lengthiness. So the main standout for Mithridates is that he is tied for top score with face of faces, because we had the two different coins, which were very cool. And in the others, it's still, an honorable display overall. He does quite a good job there. So there we go. We've gone through all our candidates, Serial. Now it's our turn to discuss and see who gets to go through. We can only have 2 of these people that can move on to the next stage. Who is it going to be? So first of all, let's start with, is there anybody that you think, no, he has to go through, or no, he's definitely not getting through? Is there anybody that immediately strikes you like that?
I am doubtful about Bahram for the reasons that we've discussed.
You're doubtful about Bahram? Okay. You don't think that the whole epic poem and
it is really cool,
fun trick shots is worth it? You think that he didn't
but
do
we also
enough
have Mithridates
for the Empire to be worth it?
Well, let's talk about it. I don't know.
Yes, exactly.
First,
tell me your thoughts.
We have 2 actual dynasty starters.
That's right.
I think that's really impressive. Can we compare them and see?
Yeah, of course. So, well, out of the dynasty starters, between Ardashir and Mithridates, they both start from small kingdoms at the edge of the empire and they take over all of it. That is a pretty similar story. What we have is that while Mithridates is more tolerant of the Greeks, for example, Ardashir tries to establish a new Persian empire. He tries to make things more strongly Persian as opposed to this mixed Hellenistic style monarchy that Mithridates has. And they both sort of fight external empires. Mithridates fights the Seleucids. Ardashir fights the Romans. That's pretty similar. They both sort of try to echo the title of King of Kings and reestablish it in their their kingdoms. They are quite similar in that point of view. The slight, it depends if you want to call it a demerit, but the fact is that while Ardashir's empire is nice and solid, because his heir Shapur is, again, great king, very impressive.
Yeah.
He is one of those rare cases of 2 Shahanshahs in a row.
Yeah.
Mithridates isn't so lucky with his direct heir, because he has, there are essentially 3 kings in rapid succession after Mithridates that almost lose the empire, and then we need Mithridates II to come over and essentially
fix it.
Save things. Yeah.
Mm.
So you could say that maybe Mithridates I's foundation was slightly more unstable, but also as a counter to that, you could say that, well, Mithridates I made an empire where there wasn't one, right? The Seleucids were just destroying themselves, and there were just like a bunch of petty little kingdoms in Iran and Mesopotamia that Mithridates knit together. While when Ardashir took the throne, Ardashir, all he had to do was just kill the head of the Parthian Empire, and then he was the new king of the empire. So
yeah, like the taking
it's
over
sort of
wasn't
an easier replacement, as opposed to just actually having to do the work of, okay, let's make deals with all these people, let's make sure that everybody's on the same page, let's see how everything works, which Mithridates would have more focused on.
We're not making
Does that
this
help
easy
you at
for...
all in your...
Yeah, no, I was like,
yes.
This is completely useless in order to make my decision.
Well, how about comparing them instead with Bahram Chobin? Do you think that Bahram falls short with the fact that he tried to found an empire and there's a lot of potential? He claimed to be the Messiah. He had this great victory against the Turks. He has this whole...
Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. That's fun. That's worth saying. And then he has this whole shot against the Turks, and then when he's exiled, he just goes back to the Turks.
That is so funny.
Greet him with open arms. That's great. I
guess
love
they
that
respect
part of the story.
A warrior.
Yeah, they say, honestly, you killed our past king. That was an amazing shot. We respect you for that.
Yeah, you made all of us very scared.
Yeah. So out of these 3 potential founders or actual founders, do you think there's one of them that's slightly below the others? Or do they all strike you as equal? Because we have to make a decision.
I know, I'm so bad at this. Why? Oh, God.
Decisions are only going to get harder, Sarah. We're going to have to pick one person.
We have 5 people. We've been talking about 3. Who are the other 2?
Well, the other 2, Khosrow I. He is the cool guy, the one who is very impressive, great. Kings are called Khosrows after him. He reforms the empire. While he doesn't found an empire, he basically finishes up the restructuring of the empire and brings it to its greatest strength. Yeah. And there's the Khosrows better Antioch, which is a great anecdote.
Yeah, I love all
there's
of
the
that.
Murdering Mazdak and his followers, very bloody but very exciting. There's his dueling with Justinian, which is cool.
Yeah.
Thought that was nice. And, well, Agathias claims that he was better than Cyrus, Darius, and Xerxes.
Yeah.
So, do you actually think Khosrow was better than Xerxes? He of the beautifying, glorifying the empire, but the Greek expedition went kind of well, but could have gone better.
Yeah, how harshly do we judge that, you know?
I mean, the thing is that it's among a bunch of really capable people.
I know.
You just need to decide that somebody is there. So, yeah, I think... So, let's see if we agree with Agathias. Let's start with that. Do you think Khosrow is more interesting than Xerxes? I personally think he is. Because while Xerxes is cool, the Greeks sort of focus on him, at least the sources focus on him insofar as it regards Greece, and that's fine. But then you don't get much more. While Khosrow, he is also founding a great capital. Like, he has Ctesiphon, he builds Takekisra, he beautifies it, he makes it amazing. It's a very impressive building. But then Khosrow, you have his personality. You can tell that he is... I enjoy his cheek with the whole, Khosrow's better Antioch and bathing in the Mediterranean, because what is Justinian going to do?
I do love that story so much. What did Xerxes do again? What is the?
I mean, Xerxes built a bridge over the Hellespont to cross into Europe. He cut through a mountain because that was easier than
Yeah. Oh, true. Yeah.
than
So it
just
was all of
sailing
the.
across it.
Yeah.
He also supposedly whipped the Hellespont when it destroyed his first bridge and
Because
just
how
went
it
on
dared.
with that.
Yeah.
And then he has the whole building Persepolis, which is just very cool and very good.
No, but I think I agree with you because moving Antioch
Yeah.
is incredible, and also he seemed to care about like what his subjects thought of him.
Yeah, he seems to have been like broadly tolerant and helpful. Apart
Yeah.
from the Mazdakites, he was pretty
Well,
good at it.
you can't
and,
win them all.
Yeah, and Khosrow was very successful externally as well. Like while Xerxes, so the problem with Xerxes, I think, is that he is in the shadow of his father Darius.
Yes.
Because Darius basically did everything that needed doing, and Xerxes has just handed this on a platter.
Yeah. And like he was still very capable because we have seen what happens when you give an empire to someone who just does not know what to do with it.
Yeah.
But less impressive than someone not starting with a perfectly put together.
Yeah. And while Khosrow did have a lot of his father doing things, Khosrow consolidated the legacy of his father as opposed and finished up the reforms as opposed to Xerxes, who was just handed the legacy of his father and carried it on, but didn't really do much to finish it up, essentially.
Fair. I think
So out of the two, I would say Khosrow is better. So I would agree with Agathias on this. We'll see if Khosrow will meet Darius and Cyrus in later rounds, and we'll see if we agree with Agathias then as well, or not.
True.
So Xerxes seems to be slightly second place. Do you think he stands up to the empire founders, or do you think this is the time to say goodbye to Xerxes?
He's so important, though. Okay, who else do we have? Who would you put him against?
I would say he is. Okay, so my problem with Mithridates, I like him. He is cool. We get nice pictures of him.
Yes.
But again, he has the problem of the Parthians where we have very few sources.
Yeah, it's always the same.
I like what he does, but I don't get a feel for him as a person. While Bahram, I know what he's like. Khosrow, I know what he's like. Xerxes, I get more of a feel for what he's like. And Ardashir, I think he is too mythologized to know what he's like as a person. So I feel like our two founders are just too much founders. You know, they're like a marble statue of George Washington. You don't get a feeling of who the guy is.
Yeah,
it's
he's
just like
there, and you're like, oh, cool statue.
He's meant to represent legitimacy.
That is
so. I mean,
fair.
Yeah. So,
in the end, we already consider all of them important. Like, all of them go to Shahanshah.
I mean, they're all Shahanshahs.
We're not taking that away.
Worth it. Yeah.
What are we measuring here? I think it's fair to go with, like, oh, he's a better character and story. Again, if you had to tell somebody who doesn't know anything about the Persian Empire.
Yeah, that's right.
About one king, who would you choose?
Yeah. I feel like, honestly, on that principle, while I like Xerxes, or rather, while I like Ardashir and Mithridates, for me, they're sort of slightly lower down. I would feel fine with excluding them because they are important, they do a lot of helpful stuff, but they're less people-y. They're less, oh, tell me about somebody cool. It's like, oh, well, this guy governed properly and did a good job for several decades and established an empire. It's like, I mean, yeah, but that's not the wow factor that you interest new people with.
Yeah.
Well, Xerxes has a bunch of that. Bahram has a bunch of that. Khosrow has a bunch of that.
That is fair.
I have a feeling that the actual founders, I would throw them out. Would you agree, Sarah, or are you going to fight me on this?
No. I think I agree, actually. I think it's a good...
Fair enough. So, during our great royal hunt, Mithridates the First disappears into the forest, never to be seen again, because
it's so
of
painful,
the obscurity of his sources.
Ugh.
While Ardashir the Great is unfortunately taken down by a bunch of lions who represent the Arsacids, who are taking revenge on him for having destroyed their empire. And well, Sarah, now we have our top three: Khosrow, Bahram, and Xerxes. Out of these three, is there somebody you think absolutely needs to go through?
I think Khosrow.
I agree.
I like
that was
him.
also my thought.
Yeah, good.
I think
glad
Khosrow
we
is just
agree.
very fun. He is just a good person.
He's
I
a
like
good
his
person,
deal. It's
he
cool.
says, of a ruler.
I mean, he's not a good person.
No.
He's absolutely not
He's
a good
cool
person.
character.
But
yes,
as Chanakya has taught us, no ruler goes to heaven.
Yes.
But he is an interesting person. Let's
Mhm.
put it that way.
yes.
And well, that leaves us the choice between, do we keep Bahram Chobin or Xerxes the First? Xerxes is very famous. He is, I think probably if you ask a random person on the street to tell you about a random Persian king, Xerxes is going to be on the high on that list, because you just learn about him for the wars with the Greeks. That's the thing you know. While Bahram, not many people know him unless you're specifically interested in this time period. But I think, he's worth knowing. He's interesting.
Mm.
So do you think, Sarah, we should reward the fact that Xerxes is more well known? Or should we say, no, you already have your limelight, it's fine, you don't need us paying attention to you. Bahram actually deserves to be more well known.
I don't know. I'm still so disappointed at Bahram for not getting to do more,
Yeah, I mean, that's
But
a
his
criterion
story
you can
is
go
so
with. You could
cool.
say, well, Xerxes achieves things, and Bahram eventually, well, he's forgotten. Xerxes builds Persepolis. That's very important.
Yeah.
While
That is
Bahram
very
just
important. Oh
dies.
no. I can't I think we have to go with Xerxes. Even though
I think you have to go with Xerxes.
getting
Let
a
me see.
guy, taking a guy out, not just a guy, but like the king of an army
Yeah.
out with an arrow to the head from like the other side of the field is, you know.
And then going at the court of his son.
And then
becoming a
going,
valiant
yeah, and
member
then
of that
like
court.
having refuge
That's
there.
great.
Why was this not like? Why
that's such a
didn't we
good story.
we get a movie about this?
I know, we should get a movie. We should get a lot of movies about these characters. They're cool. So yeah, I think Bahram, I feel like if you're doing
But Persepolis,
like a series, I feel like if you're doing a TV series, Bahram is better, because it's a lot of action, a lot of moving around. Xerxes is, again, the sort of ruled competently for 19 years, and yeah, the invasion was interesting, and he eventually lost, but Athens was victorious, so that was cool, and the empire is successful and prospers after him. So again, do we want to reward results or vibes?
I can't. Do you have a preference?
Yeah.
Tell me.
I'm trying to think about it, because Bahram's just so cool. Like, I feel like if I actually had to tell people about somebody, I would say, have you heard about Bahram? He is very cool.
And they'd probably say no.
Kind of everybody's already heard about
Yeah,
Xerxes.
exactly. I was gonna say.
Like Xerxes, you could say, oh, the guy from 300. And it's like, okay, yes, but actually no.
Yeah.
And then you can talk about that. I think I'm leaning towards Ariel.
Okay, you know what?
Can be dissuaded, but I'm leaning towards Bahram.
I have no strong preference, because I think both you can make a good argument for. So let's give it to Bahram, because Xerxes... Oh, people are going to be mad about this, but Xerxes, we know, okay? We know about him.
I mean, hey, Xerxes, you know about him. He's interesting. He's very cool. Bunch of great stuff, but...
However, I don't think Bahram will bode well against our other choices in the later rounds, to like who is the best king of the Persian Empire.
No, but again,
because he's not
interesting enough. We'll
Yes,
see how
okay.
far ahead he gets.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not evaluating the best. We're evaluating the one you want to most tell people about.
Okay.
So, okay, Sarah, decision is locked in. Xerxes, I'm sorry. As he's riding through the forest, he goes, and a branch just knocks him off his horse And oh no, oh god, the hyenas, oh god, they got to him. Poor Xerxes. So there, we get Khosrow I and Bahram VI passing through the round, which means that they are going in which group? So Khosrow is going to be in the group with Darius the Great and Mithridates the Great. Tough group. Next time. While Bahram is going to be stuck in the group with Seleucus I, Kavad I, and Bahram now.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like he's in a slightly gentler group out of those. But we'll have to see who is going to be in there in the next two groups. So next time we'll be looking at the group with Antiochus the Great, Shapur I, Artaxerxes III, Yazdegerd I, and Cyaxares, our first Shahanshah. So that'll be an exciting look through, and we'll find out who gets to go. So brilliant. Thank you all for listening. We hope you had fun. We hope you, even if you didn't agree with our ideas, we hope you enjoyed them and you enjoyed the discussion. Again, as usual, I will be putting up a poll on our social media and our Discord about which of these kings you think should have gone through, and next time we'll discuss with Serial and see if you thought that the same people should have passed as well, or if they're more hardcore Xerxes, Mithridates, or Ardashir stands that would have wanted them to go through.
I guess we will hear about it for sure.
And well, besides that, if you would like to support us in some way, there are different ways to do that. You can join us on Patreon, like our new patron Daniel Bulleen, or Bulline, depending on which part of the world you're from. Thank you. If you join our Patreon, you will have a bunch of extra episodes where you can listen to us talk about a bunch of different people, not only rulers from around the Iranian world. We have Mithridates the Great of Pontus, we have Alcibiades, we have Ashoka Maurya, we have the Prophet Mani. There's a bunch of exciting people. And just this next weekend, we'll be having an extra episode on our intelligent speech presentation from last year, or from this year, this February, where I talked about a series of royal imposters in the history of pre-Islamic Iran, where there's a bunch of familiar faces, but also some people that you may not have heard of in the main podcast. So that'll be fun to listen to.
Tune in. Check it out.
If instead you'd rather not support us monetarily, that's fine, but we'd appreciate if you could give us a review on your podcast app of choice. Let us know which king you think should have gone through. Let us know who do you think the final winner should be. Let everybody know why they should listen and where they should start from. That's always a good basis. But yeah, in that case, without any further ado, we hope you have a lovely week, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.